Hey, so do you find yourself confused by cross-training? Are you not sure how much to do, whether you should be doing it at all? What types of cross-training would be best for back-of-the-pack runners, and how to accommodate it into your training schedule without actually sabotaging the rest of your week? Well, not to worry, you're in luck. We're going to get into that and get you some answers here in this particular episode. You're listening to Choose to Endure, the go-to podcast for back-of-the-pack ultra runners. Join us as we explore uplifting stories, interviews, gear, and training tips, all geared towards the unsung heroes at the tail end of the ultra universe. My name's Richard Gleave. I've been ultra running since 2017. I've finished numerous ultra distances internationally, from 50Ks all the way up through 200 miles. I'm a qualified USCA ultra running coach, and I'm unashamedly a founder member of the Back of the Pack, just like you. Joining us today to share her wisdom, we also have Vicki Allen. So Vicki is an obsessive ultra runner herself. She is a full-time coach with Team Run Run, a full-time Orange Theory training coach, as well as somehow finding time to be a camp gladiator trainer. And she's going to help us get to the bottom of this topic. So if you're ready to get some excellent information about cross-training and discover how you can use it to improve your ultra running and be stronger for longer when you're out racing or training, then stick around. Here we go.
Discover raw, inspiring stories from runners who've been right where you are. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with your host.
He's English, not Australian.
Richard Gleave.
Vicki, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here. So before we jump in and start sort of pulling back the curtain on some of these cross-training questions, I think maybe we should start with a refresher of what exactly is cross-training. Is, for instance, pickleball cross-training? We were just talking about prior to coming on it.
Yeah. So we definitely determined pickleball was pretty much cross-training is really anything that you're going to do that can go through and kind of support balance, muscle growth, stamina, anything that you really need to go through and be able to be using to be able to actually produce runs or hikes or whatever your favorite sport is. It's kind of just the extra little work that you have to go through and do. It's like if you went to cook a meal and the meal just can't be finished right away, you got to add in all the extra cooking and details, just to make it special, and then add in your flavoring, and that's what makes your cross-training.
Fantastic. So, since we here cover a lot of the kind of back of the pack, the slower runners, as you might know, as far as our group goes, what would be some of the main benefits? Why would we want to do cross-training? Because we have a lot going on, right? We're all running around in our daily lives. We have families and goodness knows what else going on work-wise. So what is it about cross-training? We hear a lot about cross-training, right? We should be doing more. I know I should be doing more, and I don't do nearly enough cross-training. But what are the benefits? What's the value of cross-training, especially for, somebody like me who's pretty slow?
Yeah, well, there's, a lot of benefits that can come into it. It really doesn't take very much time to do it. Say that, for instance, like we both run. So a lot of the time you end up having tight muscle groups, or you just are like, hey, I can't get my legs to loosen up or untighten, and I'm getting injured all the time. All those little small muscle groups, we have to strengthen those. Even especially like as runners, it's a one-legged sport. You're always like on one or the other. So if we don't do something like yoga to get in some good stretching and work on like squat depth to be able to, get down and up to get our poles or get our gear, or, just make it to where we can go through and withstand the walks or the hikes or the climbs. That little bit of cross training, even just 15 minutes of it, can make a huge change. I definitely think that runners are some of the most injured people in the world just because we don't put in that little bit of extra time, but demand, so much of our bodies at the same time.
Yeah, I feel, and especially for me, I mean, I have a lot of hip and knee issues, and I feel like cross training, I probably should be doing more to correct imbalances that I know I have through running. Find some exercises to do that. I really feel like I should be doing more strength work, to offset. And I'm super slow, right? So the slower I am, the longer potentially I'm out on the course. And therefore I feel like, probably cross-training, I should be doing at least more strength-based cross-training because I'm just going to be out there longer, right? I'm going to put more fatigue in those muscles, like you were saying.
Yeah. And it's a lot of, being able to go through and put the time in on those. That way you can spend the time to have that extra strength to go through and do stuff. A lot of it's, for instance, like I'm one of those that when I run, I pull my shoulders up high. So I have an imbalance in like the lower part of my back. And recently it caused a rib to pop out. I'm like, okay, well, I normally don't think about my shoulders causing issues whenever I'm running. But I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's a new thing that apparently is there for us back the packers that are putting in that extra time and effort inside of it. It's like, hey, you got to protect yourself so I can go to work and pick up things and add in, weights to be able to lift. We're not going to ask people to get out there and, be doing CrossFit all the time and, not looking to sit there and sling huge dumbbells and stuff around, but something that's, a little bit of extra dumbbell work or stretching or just tiny bits will make a difference.
Yeah. Now, is this, first of all, that sounds really painful to have your rib pop out. I don't know that I've ever had that in all this time running. So that's kind of wild. How did you handle that? Like, how do you work that? Did it just pop back in?
Yeah. So, I had to start going through and seeing a PT. So that's another thing is if we don't do the cross training, we're going to spend a fortune on, Arosties or massages or anything in there. So luckily we were able to do a little bit of like needle work with being able to kind of almost do like that acupuncture, dry needling to destimulate that muscle from being so tight. And luckily over time it's kind of deswelled itself and popped itself back in. I learned a new thing called a rib rock that you can pretty much rock your rib back into place. But now we're sitting there and saying, okay, well, this is the muscle that you weren't working that you need to work to make it not ever happen again. So again,
I've learned a new phrase here, rib rock. I've never heard of rib rock, but that's awesome. Yeah.
I didn't even know ribs could pop out. So
no, that's really wild. And I have to say, before we jump onto before we keep going too, the dry needling. I recently had dry needling for the first time, and I would recommend that to anyone. That was really interesting and different, but it worked.
Yeah.
And I think I had the electronic stimulation with it. I don't know if they do it with or without, but I had it with, and goodness me, that made a difference. And I had no idea that thing even existed. So
yeah, it's a quick, easy solve that a lot of chiropractors go through and use that practice. And I was pretty much like one of those that we're always laughing about, being like, hey, I have a race in 2 days. I need you to fix me so I can go. And
yes.
That's exactly what happened. He's like, hey, I'll fix you. I can't guarantee it's not going to happen again, but let's fix it and get out.
Brilliant. Yeah, I came across this recently too, and it really works. I had no idea that it was even a thing, dry needling, but yeah, shout out to Dr. Brankney out there for dry needling my glute. It really did work, yeah. So back to cross training real quick. So you're with Orange Theory and Camp Gladiator, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what kind of training is that for those that may or may not be familiar? How does let's say Orange Theory or Camp Gladiator or any other cross training for that matter? How is it? What do you do with that? And is it or can it be tailored towards runners, especially back of the pack runners like us?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, like I was mentioning, sometimes we really don't want to have to lift, super heavy because we're not really looking to get hulked out to be able to run. We won't be able to work around our muscles, but to be able to kind of tone down, lose, not necessarily extra weight off of us, but that extra body fat that doesn't need to be there, that's not converting everything over properly for the right nutrition for us. But say, for instance, like Camp Gladiator, they're usually outdoor locations or small indoor locations. And with there, you get small dumbbells, whatever dumbbell weight you want. And then you got your mat. You're bringing your own stuff that you like there. And we just add in different workouts. you may go through and see things like deadlifts or things where we're going through and working with just one-sided work on the legs, working on mobility, working on the strength, working on continued movements to where it simulates kind of those long distances we do. That's like, hey, continue to hit that body hard and let's see how long it can withstand it. We then in turn end up building in cardio and it builds endurance. So that's the best part about that Camp Gliding. You kind of get to take it the pace you want to. Orange Theory has a little bit of different benefits. There we have like TRX straps, so we can work more on not having to have weights, but still be able to get some strong movements from you doing your own resistance. But yeah, you can go through and lift really heavy at the same time with those dumbbells. And the treadmills are amazing. You get a lot of, they have flex treads, so you're not having to hit that hard treadmill like normally we would at some of the gyms. So you get that extra support and ends up, making it to where we can watch you, we can help correct form, make it to where you're not going to end up being that injured person, but still get to, add in those muscles. We always work on meta cycles. So, whenever you're working something, you go through a phase where you're working on strength, then you're working on endurance, then you're working on both combined.
And is that in the same session, or is this sort of session on session, you're focusing on a particular aspect?
Yeah, there's session on session, especially like even with Orange Theory, we separate it a whole lot. So you may have a day where it's like, hey, you're choosing the strength class for 50 minutes, but we're focusing on just upper body. Or, hey, this is a class where we're doing a certain challenge, like say that you're wanting to be a good rower. You're like, hey, I want to, see how far I can actually row in this time frame. There's challenges that are like, here's 20 minutes. How far can you get on a rower? Different things to where they're built in there to go through and help with endurance and cardio. And one thing that I like about them as well, that Orange Theory really has, is you can go through and personalize your own heart rate zone. So say that we're looking to stay in like that zone 2. Yeah. So we can go for a long time. Then I can say, okay, this is actually the pace I'm supposed to be at. Whereas other times I'm counting on Garmin to tell me. And sometimes it's nice or it hates you.
So I will just kick in here that the coffee shop I go to in the morning up here in Kingwood is almost smack next door to an Orange Theory location. So we have to walk right past their window every time to go for coffee and breakfast. But I just have this image in my head of all of this guy or lady yelling at all these people to go faster, and then all my information is up on a screen, and I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I want that as far as as far as my cross training goes. But yeah, and everybody looks so kind of strung out, especially on the rowing machines that they have over there. So it's interesting to hear you say, yeah, you can actually tailor it to more like what we're looking for, which would be to stay in, zone 2 for that base training. Because everything I see when I walk by is like, these people are just going for it and dying on these rowing machines. And I've tried rowing, and I'm sure it's really useful, but I mean, my back just won't let me do a lot of rowing, and I think my technique is probably terrible. So do you guys teach the technique for proper technique before you get on?
Yeah, so that's actually what I learned, is I'm the person who hates the row. I will avoid it with the plague. I don't want to be on them. I'll go into the assault bike or anything else. So I've had to work on that and had to learn the technique myself, learn that proper movement and be able to, correctly do it. And in turn, I'm like, hey, turns out I didn't know how to use my shoulders properly on things. So it helped, fill in extra little gaps on stuff. And I know, some of the original people that I followed whenever I first got into endurance running, it was kind of like, hey, you got to do this extra little work in between. And I'm like, oh, no, we don't have time for that. And I'm like, no, it took like 5 to 10 minutes. I'm a horrible stretcher. Yet every single day now, I'm having to show stretches, do stretches. And it's like 20 minutes a day, maybe I'm stretching. I have to. And it's made it so much different in races. Like I'm way less tighter than I ever used to be. Just from that tiny.
Is that just stretching as part of your Orange Theory workout or any other workout? Or are you just at home in the morning doing a stretch routine?
No, it's just part of what I'm doing just during the workouts. So it's making that little bit extra. Say my day, I don't really have very much extra time. So it's like, hey,
and I feel like you can stretch or do some base workout if you can figure out which ones you need. You can do that kind of thing while you're watching the TV or while you're listening to music or whatever you're doing. You know, you can do that while other stuff is going on around you at the house, potentially, without having to go. I kind of feel like the world is conspiring against me. It's telling me I've got to do this stuff. So in the spot where my coffee, just down the road, the two things just opened up. One, Stretch Labs, which is a big stretch kind of spot, new business. And then right next to that is a brand new craft beer pub. So I'm like, look, I've got everything covered here. All I need to do is come here and get this cross train. I can work on my arm. Does that count? Lifting beer, is that cross training?
You get the extra calories in that way, right? We determined that one. It's a
calories and hydration through beer. I'm a big fan. I'm doing it every time, and I have done it. In fact, I did it in the in Bandera. I managed to find a beer. I made it my goal on the second lap to find someone with a beer, and I eventually did. 2 aid stations from the finish. One of the volunteers had a beer. So
somebody always has it.
Somebody always has a beer, and at ultra races, it's usually an IPA for some reason. I don't know why, but I mean, not that I mind, but it's rare to find something not an IPA.
Yeah,
anyway.
Right. Some little things like that. Say that you're at the office and excuse me, you have to stand up, and you're like, hey, just while I'm standing and typing or talking, I can pick like one leg out behind the desk and just talk to you. And it's like, hey, that's already extra work, and you're just sneaking it in there, or bending over to get the laundry a certain way, or changing when you're getting up from the couch to a squat instead of, just getting up and making your body tired from not having good form, just getting up and down with something. So you get little things in there, and then, hey, if I did this, then I get my beer.
Yeah, and I think that sort of leads into the direction of where I was going to go, because one of my biggest excuses is probably the correct term, if I'm being brutally honest, for not doing enough cross training, is that back to kind of what we were talking about before, like how can you balance your cross training needs with both regular running routines that you've got without sort of destroying your running in the process, like your ability to actually go out tomorrow and do a run that you need to do, and fit it in with all the other stuff that you've got going on with life. I think for me, at least, that's the biggest challenge that I find with cross training. Not so much I don't enjoy doing it. I mean, it's nice and it's good to have sort of something different to focus on physically rather than just running the whole time, work different parts of the body. Mentally as well, just breaks up that routine. But I think for me especially, it's the challenge of, okay, how do I fit that in? I'm already stretched to the limit trying to do family and work and podcasts and actual running training. So where can I fit, or how can I fit cross training in? And is it okay to maybe sub out like an easy run on a day here or there to actually do cross training?
Yeah, you should definitely have a good rule of thumb is trying to get to the gym at least like 3 times a week. Rather that's like focusing on stretching for 30 minutes or so, and then having 2 days where you're focusing on strength. Like for instance, Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, I focus on more cardio. And so those days are days to where I'm like, hey, I'm going to back to back my short runs up with having something where it's like, hey, I'm going to work with, not like super heavy dumbbells, but kind of in between. And so that way I'm still working on getting that extra work in, but I'm not going to go through and overstress the body so it can't do something extra. Whereas like on Tuesdays or Thursdays, I may do like a yoga or do like a heavy lifting day, more of like Olympic lifting bars, or focusing on just lifting heavy on that day. I also put it on Thursday because I know that my long run is on Saturday. So if I put them back to back on Friday and Saturday, then I may be too sore on Saturday to have, a good run. But I can also weigh that out and say, hey, once it's time to back down those miles that 2 week before taper time, before the race. Then at 2 weeks, I stop heavy lifting. I'll only do body work movements, keeping those movements there just so I get that mobility in the legs or in the arms, or, making sure that I'm keeping my core engaged. And I'm not going to sit there and lift heavy so I won't be super sore before a race. So 2 weeks before stop.
I think that's really interesting too that you talk about upper body, because when you talk cross training, most people, rightly, I think, focus on, okay, I can get some additional cardio here without sort of battering my legs that I'm doing already, or they focus on strength, lower body strength, because obviously, that's natural. But I do think there's a lack of focus on upper body strength for ultra running. I mean, running is a full body activity, and you're carrying a pack. And if you've got, especially in some races where you can be required to carry 3, maybe 4 liters of water, that's a heavy pack with all the rest of your gear in it that you're potentially lugging up a hill. I think it's really important to focus on upper body strength as well as lower body strength, and to your point, like get some shoulder workouts in. Make sure you can carry that. Poles as well. I mean, if you're going to use poles for any length of time, your arms are going to be, hopefully, if you're using them correctly, your arms are going to be pulling. You're going to get some pretty sore shoulders if you haven't done enough training on your upper body. So yeah, I think upper body is, for me,
a lot
probably
of the time,
as important.
we're starting to see a lot of people go through and invest in like those weighted vests. So
they're
going out and doing those miles anyway. If you're got like a short mile day, just be like, hey, I'm going to put the vest on and do more of a hike today and see if I can power walk as fast as I would have run with that little vest. A lot of that is a really good idea, especially if like you're coming in to they're newly wearing a pack because you're getting into those longer distances, or if, like you were mentioning, you're required to carry a certain amount of weight. Doing Cocodona, that was the first time I had gone through and experienced having 4 liters on me, and that was definitely a focus we focused on, was working with those poles and carrying that extra weight, because it made a big difference.
Yeah, I think people, I wouldn't say neglect, but it isn't front of mind when you think about cross-training, like to make sure you work upper body as well as lower body and just general fitness. So talking about exercises potentially, are there some sort of exercises that are more useful for us as back of the pack ultra runners that we might be able to do either at home or in the gym, especially if we're not super familiar with the gym in particular? A lot of people are somewhat intimidated, if you're not a regular at the gym, to just kind of walk in there and start picking up free weights among all the grunters and people dropping the barbells.
Well, those free weights are probably your best friends. Everything inside of a gym is free weights. The machines, don't even worry about them. To be honest, they're going to be more time for you to figure out than you need to be wasting. But things that are one-legged work, because again, we're on one leg a whole lot. So working with things like maybe getting on all fours and they have like these little sliding discs that you can go through and put your feet on, and sitting there and like driving one knee in at a time onto your hands. That one's a good one because you're working on like mountain climbers, technically is what they are. So you're sitting there working with one leg at a time, or working with like a single leg deadlift. So you're holding one dumbbell or 2 dumbbells and you lift one leg back behind you and bring them down to your leg. That's focusing on like stability. So when we're having to like climb and hit, a certain spot, we're not going to trip or fall over. Even finding a playground that has like those little wood chips or the rubber ones. Oh yeah. Those, a lot of us, our ankles end up bothering us. So even just walking back and forth on that, that's technically not even using any weights, but it'll be a huge help. Squats are a major one because that's focusing on your middle of your core, working on the mobility for those legs again. And a lot of the times, since we are constantly still on those one legs at a time, you can sit there and use those to help correct that body and keep it upright. Most all of us, no matter how new we are, we all know, hey, if I try to send my booty down to the ground, I'm going to end up with a squat. So it's one thing that almost everybody knows how to do at some point. It's just adding that extra weight and resistance to those. So those are 3 simple ones to work on.
Yeah, those squats too, they really help when you have to go take your shoes off at the end of the race. You gotta, oh man, it's the most painful thing when you have to squat down. I tell you. So are there some? So now we've got some exercises. I know I've got some exercises that I need to be doing, and I can. I did like your suggestion. Throwing some of these in while you're watching TV, or maybe at lunch at work. If you can do something in your office or even your cube, if you can just do some squats in there or do some one leg stuff.
Yeah, even simple things like when you're sitting there doing dishes, you can. Hold the dish up a little higher and sit there and scrub it. And then when you're going to put it inside the dishwasher, just tuck your core in and turn it more into like a little squat down there to get to it.
Yeah.
So we're already doing this stuff.
For sure. And the one I have done inconsistently, which I should be doing more consistent, I suppose. I read online one time that if you stand on one leg while you're brushing your teeth and hold your other leg up, and then just balance, it really starts to work your glute and ankle strength. But just finding things to do in every day that can assist, which means you don't have to spend the time going to a different place to do it, because you may or may not have time in your schedule, depending on who you are, to be able to do those things. Sitting
there just picking up, the big water jugs, those are farmers' carries. You're already carrying those huge jugs. So that's a huge thing.
I tell you, I must cross-train at least once a week then when I get the groceries out the car, because I'm like the guy with every bag. I'm not making 2 trips. I'm making one trip.
Go back out there either.
I'm not going back outside. I'm doing one trip and that's it. So I've got every bag I can handle. So I'm classifying that as a farmer's carry at least. Yeah. At least once a week I'm doing cross-train. Absolutely. So Vicki, noting all those sort of exercises that we can do, are there some common mistakes or things that we should be avoiding when we're thinking about cross-training and doing some of these exercises? What should we not be doing?
Yeah, a lot of the time is, like you want to go into the things, sometimes we'll see other people and they'll be lifting really heavy. Like, oh, okay, well, I guess that they're lifting that heavy, so I need to lift that heavy. Mm-hmm. Don't just jump into it. That's the easiest way to go through and get yourself injured, because 1, you might be newer to it, and 2, it's going to require some different muscles sometimes to do that same exercise, but lift it heavier, because you may have certain muscles that say, hey, I can handle this load, and then when you go heavier, then it's a whole other load, whole other muscle group. So ease yourself into those weights, stretch and warm up before you actually start lifting heavier. You'll hear people do like a warm up, and then you'll see a drill. And the drill, people are like, oh, well, it's like the same exercises as the workout. I don't need to do that. No, do it, because that's the extra warm up to your body before you're hitting it hard. That also, for us backpackers that are spending extra time, getting that extra hit in that work is what's going to make us a little bit more tired, so we can get that fatigued feeling for how we always feel when we get into 30 miles or so or longer.
Yeah, I think that could also help with technique, I suppose, is what I'm thinking. Technique for the particular exercise you're doing. I mean, it's all right doing these exercises, but the idea is that you get the technique right. Otherwise, they may end up being either useless or even worse, causing you some sort of injury from trying to do these exercises. So
usually on the workout, you're trying to move a little faster in that section too. So you want to be able to have that warm up and that practice on those movements before you might do it so fast you don't really notice you hurt something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just get the movement right and then do the exercise and use it as a warm up. Essentially, I think that's great advice. Now, something for me in particular and others out there, as I approach my 50th year, Obviously a lot of us are aging over time. Does the strategy for cross training, does it change somewhat? Does the content of what we're doing as cross training, should that evolve with us as we age? Do we need to do more strength or more, I don't know, cardio as I age? What should I be doing as I hit my 50th year and beyond?
Yeah, a lot of the time, and this is what you would normally think is going to go the opposite way. You think the older I'm going to get, the lighter I need to lift. I don't need to do as much because body's going to break down. But it's the exact opposite. Say, for instance, like I'm not quite to my 50s, but I have early onset osteoporosis. And I was like, oh, they're going to tell me I can't run anymore. I can't do anything extra. They were like, no, girl, we want you to lift, and we want you to lift heavy. We want those extra bones to get that strength inside of them that, your body's not just naturally producing anymore. So the older we get, the more important it is to do the actual cross training and be able to add that extra strength in there. Now, you may have some things that are like, hey, I can't quite, do that same movement the same way I used to. And it's like, okay, well, over the years, things happen. You may have a car accident or surgery that leaves, maybe your shoulders. I can't tell you how many people I run into that they're like, my shoulder. And I'm like, yeah, but we can work through that. You can get that same muscle hit, but not have to worry about that range that's working. So my biggest advice to you on things like those is don't eliminate everything. Just ask that trainer or whoever, you're working with, be able to say, hey, what is a way that I can still hit that muscle, but not have to do it that same way? And that way you can still get that benefit of it, because just like you were mentioning, since we're the backpackers, it doesn't mean that we get to be the people without the ice or the food or the drink. That just means that we're spending that extra time to do things carefully and in the correct way, and taking our bodies to that full extent that they can get to.
Absolutely. I choose to think that we are the real endurance athletes out there, as opposed to the guy that ran Bandera in like 8 hours. I mean, he was home and in bed before I had even booted off my second loop. So who's the real endurance athlete there? The guy who took 18 hours or the guy that was done in 8? Absolutely, yeah. Awesome. So we talked a lot of physical here, but I wanted to see too if if there was any correlation really between cross-training and sort of kind of what we were just saying, like mental toughness and resilience really for ultra runners at the back of the pack. Can it help build some of that mental toughness?
Yeah, a lot of the time, we're sitting there constantly being like, hey, we can't. I'm not going to make it. I'm just going to, stop where I'm at. Well, whenever you're sitting there and you're doing the workout, you get those chances daily, weekly to be like, hey, I got a little further down on that, squat, or hey, I lifted a little heavier than I did that last time, or I got more reps in, or I did a movement I couldn't do before. You get all those little wins to convince your mind of, hey, I can do hard things. I can do things I didn't think that I can do. And that translates directly into that running. You also have, we strive a lot off of people, right? If we have somebody who's good and hanging around with us and giving us a good conversation, we'll go and go and go. We are paying attention to that and not our suffering.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're in the gym, you're like, everybody's suffering along with me. And if you're doing that group session, like Orange Theory, you're all doing them at the same time. So it's sucking at the whole time for everybody.
I love that. Yeah, I really hadn't thought of it that way. It's an opportunity. Every time you're doing a workout and you get to the point where you think, I'm not sure if I can do any more of these, whatever this is that you're doing, it's an opportunity to endure, right? Back to the podcast and to the running. It's an opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to do one extra one this go, or I'm going to go for an extra set this go around. It's a chance to practice the mental resilience to do more. And you get to do it like over and over in small doses, and that way potentially when you get on out on the course, maybe that maybe that carries over. I think that's really interesting.
I think, mental is a big thing. I was watching a thing on Noah Lyles not too long ago, and he has, a mental coach just in itself. And I'm always like, what are they always talking about? And it's pretty much exactly that. It's like, hey, all you have to do is just get your mind right. So it's like, whatever you're doing is going to help get that mind right to make it through everything.
So what you're saying, Vicki, is if I get a mental coach, I'm going to be able to run like Noah Lyles. I can bust out my 100 and 200s and just go for it. Is that because that would be awesome?
I thought that maybe that's the one coaching I'm missing, but I was like, I don't know of somebody who's strong enough to be able to be like, hey, girl, when you go do those Summit 200s and make it 12, might be like, you're not going to convince me on that one.
No, I don't think so. No, that's pretty fun. Yeah, but a mental coach, that could be very interesting too. I'm sure they're out there. I don't know that I've looked into that, but that might be something interesting to an interesting avenue to go down as well at some point. Pretty good. So we've done all this training. We've been to Orange Theory. We've been over to Camp Gladiator, and we've got up at I didn't even know there was like a 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. I can't believe folks go out that early, especially at this time of year. I mean, do you, participation wise, do you get a lot of participation? Because I imagine.
Yeah.
Really?
It's, just like, if we were going through and going out to a race and something happens, like for instance, I got the flu, could go out to Bandera and chase you around, then it was like, oh man, I missed out. Well, I think that they feel the same way if, they don't get their workouts or, the gym's closed or something's going on and they're like, hey, you took a part of my day away. I need to have my patterns.
Yeah, I must admit there were not many people chasing me around, and at the speed I was going, there was not much chasing going on. But we didn't get through, but that's cool. So, how do we know whether all those things are actually working or not? How do I measure whether the effort that I'm putting in on the cross training is actually having value? That it's actually paying off come race day? Is it all sort of anecdotal, or are what are your thoughts on how do I tell if it's working or not?
Yeah, so you'll be able to see, like for instance, your speed may go through an increase because you've gotten it to where your muscle groups are now stronger, so they can take on more, and you're like, hey, it's not as hard to make this pace as it used to go through and be, and it's not necessarily because I put in a ton of miles. It's because I've strengthened those muscle groups to say, you take over a little bit of it and let the heart rest a little bit. And that helps out a lot. It doesn't even take that long. It's 6 weeks without actual strength training or cross training technically is all it takes to diminish every bit that you put into it. So if you go through and are just working out for 6 weeks, you'll automatically already see results back into your movements. Balance work is a huge thing on there. So say, for instance, like I'm coming around a turn. I might go through and feel like, hey, I'm a lot more confident going down those rocks than I used to be because I've gotten in, say box jumps or, walked some extra stairs in the day. And I'm like, you know what? I feel more confident climbing on those rocks, or my ankles feel better because I've worked on those and moving that range around. So a lot of the time, cross training is simply there just to make you feel better. And I think that was one of my biggest goals, was saying, I want to race and I want to race these distances, but I just don't want to have to suffer as badly. So getting to those distances but not suffering is a huge thing. And that's what cross training has really provided, specifically just even my training.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. Well, I think there's a ton of great information there, and I really appreciate you coming on to share. One of the things we like to do on each episode is encourage guests to choose a song, and that song gets added to the free Spotify Choose to Endure playlist. If you haven't already gone out there to check it out, do so. There's some belters out there, and the list is getting awesome. So I use that one while I'm out running, or while I'm going to be at the gym doing some of this cross training we're talking about here. Vicki, did you have a song that you wanted to add to that list? And and if so, why does it resonate with you? Why did you pick it?
Yeah, a lot of the time, when I come across a song and it's just like, hey, if I feel the same way as that song, or I'm like, yeah, that's how we feel about that, then I'm like, hey, that's a perfect one. And I know you could sit back, hey, that's a perfect ultra song. And I'm like, It is a perfect ultra song.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, hey, you fully understand that situation that I was in, and I understand that you understand, so that makes me feel better.
Yeah, this song, I think if I am reading it right, it's Born for This by The Score. Is that the score?
That's it.
I've never heard of it, but I did listen to it prior to coming on air, and it's an absolute stonker. I mean, it could have been specifically written for ultra running. So definitely, if you are not familiar with the song, as I was not, definitely go out and check that song out, because it's an absolute barnstormer of a song. Very cool. Is that one you knew of before, Vicki, or were you out kind of sourcing songs? Is that a regular on your playlist?
It's a pretty regular one. Pretty often I'll run across a song that I like, and I'm like, hey, I've never heard that one before. And then before I know it, I hear it a lot, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like, well, I guess other people are liking it too now.
Yeah, and just thinking about asking for songs to add to the playlist, it's been a really interesting journey, because I just thought it would be a nice kind of fun way to close out chatting with people and put some songs out there, and it's turned into this really sort of kind of this opportunity for people to connect with music, and the music has really meant something to them. Every person who's chosen a song has had a really cool reason for why that song meant something to them. And some people kind of listen to it over and over, and it becomes the theme and the anthem to a particular race, or to a particular block of training, or this is how I envision myself finishing a race, is running to this song through the finish line. I think it's so emotional and so emotive, picking a song, and I didn't anticipate that at all. I just thought we were picking a song, but like you say, a song, if you repeat the song and you really get into it, it can really start to have some meaning for you, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, sometimes you'll be, in the middle of a race and in a lull, and you're like, I gotta find that song.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm a new person again.
Gotta find that song. It's amazing the impact music can have on mentality. I think that's essentially what I'm learning through asking and hearing people's why behind why do you pick, what does this song mean for you? And it really does have meaning. There aren't many songs that I've received through this first season of the podcast that people have it's like a throwaway song. I mean, every one of them has had some sort of meaning to people, and I think it's really cool to explore what that meaning is and how people view themselves through music, and what the music does for them, either to assist or motivate while you're out. So I don't know, it is fun, but I think it's really cool at the same time, and it's fascinating to listen to the why behind songs like that and what they can do for you.
Yeah, I think songs too, they kind of give you a little sneak peek into people's souls. So say that you're pacing somebody, and then they're like, hey, what are you listening to? And they tell you some of their songs. You're like, I didn't know you listened to that, but now I know more about you.
Yes, I've got to do an episode on that. I'm going to write this down. I think I have to do an episode on music in ultra running and impact, and much like you're saying, like if you're out pacing or running, and ways to get mentally the best out of yourself through music while you're ultra running. So good call. I'm going to write that down. At some point in the future, I'll have an episode on music. That'll be kind of cool. Well, as we close out this episode, Vicki, super thanks again for your time and your insights. Many runners do successfully integrate cross-training into their overall training plans. I think as long as you think logically about what you're doing and the amount of of cross-training you're doing, the type of training you're doing, and where and how it can fit in your overall schedule, we have learned today that it can be an incredibly useful tool to enable you to push longer and go farther out there with less stress, with less hurt. So it can also help if you're injured or you're looking to freshen up training too. So get out there. Don't be afraid to give it a go. You can find loads of structured cross-training at places like Orange Theory and Camp Gladiator. I'm sure you could go out to YouTube and look up some home runner exercises, or maybe connect directly with a coach, much like Vicki here, to get the best sort of personalized workouts to support your specific ultra goals as well. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the show so you have something to listen to while you're out doing your workouts. Get notified each time a new episode comes out, and of course, follow, share, and review. Doing any of those things really does help with the algorithms, which in turn helps others find the show. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook, and over at choosetoendure.com, and now also over on YouTube for a video version. So be sure to head over to any of those spots and check us out and say hello, drop a message, shout out a topic or some feedback if you have a moment. Until then, run long, run strong, and keep choosing to endure.
Thanks for running with us at the Choose to Endure podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. We had a blast. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. Keep racking up the miles and the stories, and we'll catch you at the next trailhead. Until then, remember to run long, run strong.